Hello everyone and welcome to episode 30 of Behind the Frame. Mike did last week's episode and he did a sepia image. So I thought I would do another black and white. I know a couple of months back I did my first entry, which was of a Swainson spur file, also black and white. But this one in particular I wanted to show all of you. I put a poll out on my Instagram story between two images from my recent trip to Serengeti. Very similar images, one's a bit tighter, which is the one that I'm going to be working on today, and the other's a little bit wider. And it was a very, very close poll between the two of what everyone on my Instagram wanted to see. But the closer angle just took it. So today I'm going to be editing the closer shot of the lines on the rock, or a line on a rock. But I will also keep in the back of my mind that I've got the other image which I will edit for all of you as well at a later stage. And the reason why I wanted to do a black and white image is just because in these particular scenes of lines on rocks, especially with a bit of cloud cover, it can be very, very dramatic in black and white. So not to say that the color image is a bad one, but I just wanted to do a conversion for you in black and white and show you the end result. So if you have a look here, I've just got a lioness on a rock. It is relatively tight in terms of the shot, but what I really like about it is obviously my subject, the lioness. She's yawning, so that adds to the image already. But we've got a bit of cloud cover. There's some dark areas in the cloud, and then you've got this beautiful texture of the rock below. So instantly, when I was sitting out in the field and looking at the scene, I got the idea to convert it into a black and white, and we also chatted about it with all of our guests. For me, what strikes me in a black and white image is high contrast, so very light areas, very dark areas, and textures. So we've got the rock and we've got the lioness here, which adds the textural element. We've got the light part of the clouds as well, and the dark areas of the rock, which adds the contrast. So overall, in my mind, looking at this while out in the field, I thought this is going to be a great black and white conversion. So I'll take you through a little bit of my mindset when approaching an image like this. I generally like to have a few basic things that I like to follow just to give me a starting point. Firstly, I look on the right hand side, crop. Looking at this, to be honest, I actually quite like the composition. You may say that this is a bit of wasted space on the left. Not really in this particular circumstance. You can see the lioness is off-centered. Look at the direction of her body. She's facing to the right, and I've left all the space on the right-hand side. I also really like how the rock comes in almost in the middle of the frame, or a third of the way up, and then dies down into the right-hand side. So in terms of composition, I'm really happy with this. I'm not going to do anything to it. I'm going to leave it for now. Once again, I can always make an adjustment later on and crop in if need be. So I'm going to say done. I always like to work through the basic menu first, just to try and get all the global adjustments out the way, and just make sure that I'm happy with colors, highlights, shadows, lights, darks, exposure, all of that kind of thing. So looking at this, remember I said I want to convert it into a black and white image. So as a starting point, before I touch the basic menu, I'm going to press V. That converts it into a black and white. There we go. Now we can see what we're working with. Obviously, there's not too much to this black and white as it is now. I'd like to add a bit of contrast and just really make my subject, and especially this rock, pop out nicely. So what I'm going to do is, you can see all the shade area here. I'm going to make quite a large adjustment to the shadows. You can see how it starts to bring out a bit more of the detail in the mouth of the lioness, the chest, the front left paw. And what I want to do is I want to add the contrast, remember? So by moving the black slider just to the point where you start seeing these marks, you'll see in the bottom left hand corner here, I'm holding Alt down and then moving the black slider just to where those marks start appearing, and already it starts bringing back these dark areas. So I'm not losing the area that I lifted with the shadows, but I am enhancing these very, very dark areas. Now highlights, you can do the same. Holding Alt, you can lift it. Okay, that doesn't do too much here. If I use whites, you can see it there. Those are areas that are starting to be blown out. If I leave it, we're already getting a bit more of this contrast here. I'm going to take highlights down a little bit. I don't want to blow out any of this detail that is particularly light in this area in the top of the frame, but I don't want to lose any of that detail. Now what I'm going to do is I've brought blacks, I've made a bit of contrast, okay. I'm going to add a bit of clarity, and now what this does is, so you will notice I didn't do anything with the contrast. I very seldomly use a global contrast adjustment here. I rather try and create the contrast through using highlight, shadows, whites, blacks, and what I can do is just lift clarity ever so slightly, and what this is doing is it's sharpening all the edges, so all the edges of the lioness here, but also all these little nooks and crannies on the rocks, and it's just enhancing that a bit more. So you can already see we're starting to get this lioness to pop out a bit more. Now to add on to this adjustment that I've done here, I'm going to use the tone curve. I will lift highlights slightly. Once again, remember, I don't want to blow out much of this here. I still want to have all the sky or a bit of detail in the sky. There's certain areas that I may not be able to avoid blowing out, but I'm going to leave just the highlights darks. I'm going to bring darks down again just to add that contrast. Okay, you can see, look at this beautiful contrast coming in on the rock, on the lioness's body. If I'm losing a bit of her in terms of shadows, I can always lift the shadows slightly again and do something like that. And that's pretty much all I would do in the tone curve. Now, what I really like to do with black and whites as well is work on individual colors. So by selecting black and white here, you can see all the different colors that make up images, and although it's a black and white image, if I do make any adjustment to specific colors, you can see the sky here. The sky is, apart from the clouds, is blue. You can see I can make it lighter or darker. Remember, I want to add contrast to the image, so I'm going to make it a bit darker. So you can see this area on the right hand side becomes quite dark on the left hand side, and you can still see the definition of the clouds. We can play around with colors here. You can see, so a bit of the orangey color on the rock and the lioness. I'm going to lift slightly. So now what you can see, it's just adding that contrast. Dark doesn't really do anything for me. I want that detail. I want to bring out that lioness. So I'm going to lift it, say plus 28, and now you can see this beautiful light coloration on the left hand side of her body, or our left, her right, and then on her chest you've got a bit of the shade area, but remember we brought up the shadows earlier, so you've still got detail. You can see markings, teeth, tongue inside the mouth, and in terms of her, that's pretty much all I would do. Detail, I'm going to use detail here. Once again, using masking, if I hold Alt down, lift it, remember the white areas are the areas that are going to be affected. So what I want to do, I'm not going to worry about the cloud this side, but what I'm going to do is I've lifted it quite drastically. So 70, I'm going to add sharpening and detail, just to see the outline of her in detail, and now that sharpens this whole area. So you can see here, also shooting, we were relatively far away, 5.6. The whole of the rock here is in focus and sharp, as well as the lioness. What I could have done is I could have shot at aperture 7.1 or f8, just to guarantee that this edge of the rock here is also in focus. But like I said, being relatively far away, my depth of field, even at 5.6, was relatively big, allowing me to get most of the rock and the lioness in focus. So now that I've done that, looking at this overall image, really nice. I really like it. But how can I add a bit more contrast to the image? First thing that comes to mind is I'm happy with the sky, I'm happy with the lioness. I'd like to maybe add a bit more contrast on the rocks. So what I'm going to do is use the brush. Let's bring density down, 60, and flow down as well. So remember, just to make all these settings on the right hand side, I've got a default setting, so everything is set to 0. And what I'm going to do is, if I press O for overlay, these dark areas of the rock I'm going to highlight. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Just for the purpose of this, I'm going to do it relatively quickly. Highlight the rocks. just these dark areas. You can see the red area, the overlay is the areas that are being affected, and all I'm going to be doing is making these areas a little bit darker. You can do a bit more than this. I'm just, for the sake of this, doing it relatively quickly. But you can see it's quite nice. The guideline that you get is the rock, the color of this granite boulder, generally tells you or gives you an idea of the areas that you should be darkening and the areas that you should leave alone and keep light. So O for overlay. Now I'm going to come to the exposure. You can see that's far too dark, obviously, but just a minor adjustment. Let's say basically a third underexposed, and you start to get this this contrast back. Look at these dark areas, and you know, so looking at this image now, I'm really happy with this. I really like it. So the areas that we first mentioned, the sky, we've managed to darken a few areas, add contrast in the sky alone. Looking at the lioness, which is the main subject here, she's yawning, so you want to try and enhance that. We've lifted the shadows, we've kept all the detail here in the shadows. You can see tongue, teeth, mouth, chest, the markings, and then we've also kept the rock in for contrast. We've got we've got contrast between the rock and the sky and the subject, and we've also got contrast on the rock itself with these dark areas and these light areas. So all in all, lots of contrast and texture, which in the beginning is what I mentioned I like to see in a black and white image, and we've managed to secure both in this image, creating an all-around decent black and white image. So that's just a quick edit from my side on black and white, especially things to look out for. Remember, guys, to create contrast, so light areas, dark areas are great for black and white images as well as textures. And like I've mentioned, we've got both in this. So things to keep in mind when you're out in the field taking photographs, what's going to be a good color image, what's going to be a good black and white image, and then following the process, putting it into something like Lightroom and start the editing process, and get an end result like this, which is something that you envisioned while you were out in the field before you even took the photograph. I hope that you all found this helpful. If you've got any questions or if you've got any images of mine that you would like me to edit for you, I'd be more than happy to do so. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will be doing another episode in the not so distant future. For now, I'm going to say goodbye. Hope you all have a good one.